Well, I guess we know that it is time to wake up and it is time for the morning news wherever you are. Pretty good stuff. And I believe we're going to start checking it out. Let's see. Good morning. I hope everyone's having a good morning. And this is my first podcast, first episode of my podcast. I'm still working out my style and some of the technical aspects. Happy for feedback if anyone has anything to say. I am always trying to learn new things and appreciate the advice of others when I can get it. All right. So today is Monday, January 23rd, 2023. I did just celebrate Chinese New Year yesterday with some friends on Sunday. That was really exciting. I had several different treats that I had never tasted before, so that was pretty fun and really delicious. One was this lotus root that was really kind of magical. As soon as you put hot water over these like dried element, it turned into this instant jelly. So that was like a really fun treat. We also had a really fun pumpkin roll from Puerto Rico, which was delicious, that they had brought back from a trip they had been on recently. And there was another little fun treat that had the taste of a candied apple from China. And that was a really special treat. Okay. All right. So, yeah, just first thing on the news today, the big news has to do with the Monterey Park incident. So let's see if there's anything else in the news. Well, CNN's definitely got some pretty deep ones. You know, there's a lot of really important, sad things going on in the world. I usually, when I consume news, those stories, I usually need to be a little bit more awake before I can take them in. But they're important, and I still make sure to read the articles every day for myself. I totally believe that all news needs to be consumed if you're like a normal person in the world and you're just trying to understand the world we live in. You know, this is our planet, and we're kind of the ones that are responsible for it. So it's important to know what's going on in the world, locally, globally. But you don't have to have the most horrific news the first thing you hear about every single morning. That can be overwhelming sometimes, and that's okay. So sometimes there's other news. I do see that there is some political news going on. But it doesn't seem to be very interesting political news, to me at least. It has to do with the documents that were discovered in President Biden's residence. That to me is, I'm not saying it's not an important issue, but it's on the grand scheme of life, not that important to me personally. Let's see. Well, I guess we're finding out that this particular website has a lot of more of the heavy news. But ooh, look, there's some space news. So let's go see that article. All right. So this is kind of fun because this is the Planet Human podcast, which is really what we're trying to all do, is try to show the humanity in each other and how we have a lot more in common than we think maybe. We are all human. So here you go. This has to do about all of the different compounds, the down to the atoms in our bodies as humans are from stardust. I feel like a lot of people already know this, but maybe you don't. Um, and so this article just goes into that. Yeah. So there's a new book coming out, of course, being promoted by Dan Levitt, and it's talking about the origin of, what makes up the human body. And again, all of this is happening in the cosmic turmoil of interstellar bodies. And it is kind of fun to learn about. So I highly encourage this one. So this news article, which I do recommend this morning, if you have a chance to read it, is "We Are All Made of the Stars, a long trip from the Big Bang to the human body." So that's a good one. Okay. And that is by Brian Nelson on CNN's website. So I highly recommend that news article. That's a fun one to read for the day. Let's see if we can find anything else that'll be a fun one. Sometimes NPR's website, National Public Radio, has some good news articles. A lot of them are the same articles that we saw on CNN's website. I'm sure it's just a different, maybe different or similar perspective to what CNN had. It's bringing up the issue of ethical shopping. That's something interesting. I already have a little test episode that I made. I talked about a sportswear brand that I've been using now since the pandemic began. I've been doing weightlifting, which I really love as an exercise. It gives you a lot of confidence. It gives me a lot of confidence, but in general, weightlifting is a really fun sport to try out. If you're having a hard time finding something physical that gets you moving, makes you happy, it's good to just keep testing different exercises and find one that you like, because you never know, you might find one. And for me, I finally found an exercise that I could be consistent with and really enjoy. And for me, that was weightlifting. And when it comes to exercise clothing for weightlifting, I didn't know anything about it. So I was kind of a new beginner, wanted to learn. And I tried a few different brands. And getting back to the issue of, ethical shopping, I started to think about, during the pandemic especially, where are the items that I'm consuming coming from? And one of them happened to be the clothing for, working out at the gym. And that's when I discovered the brand Buff Bunny. And one of the things I like about them is that it is a woman, female-owned company with, it appears, largely female employees. And that really was important to me at the time. There's a lot of things to consider when you're making a choice of consuming something. It could be your cleaning products. It could be the packaging for the cleaning products. It could be the contents of the cleaning products. But ethical shopping, I believe, is something that's becoming more and more important. So that article is under the business section for NPR. And I do recommend that if you have a chance and are looking for something to read. That is written by Caitlin Rad. And that, again, is on the NPR website. So let's see if the Wall Street Journal has anything interesting. The WSJ, as they say. All right. So their top article, of course, the Wall Street Journal is geared towards business. Their top article for today is "Market Recovery Hinges on a Rapid Drop in Inflation." So if you want to read about the top financial news, I don't think everyone's interested in that, but you might be. And so why not? That article is written by Matt Grossman. And, so far things are looking pretty good. Inflation's definitely coming down. Why is it, and is it sustainable? I think is the next question that a lot of economists in the U.S. are kind of holding out on. Of course, I will tell you my opinion on this. When it comes to this reaction and concern over inflation, I do believe that's a little extreme. My thoughts and opinions on this is mostly that workers, specifically in the US, were starting to have a little bit more power over employers as far as job mobility and asking for better conditions on the job, asking for more salary on the job. And it almost seems like inflation hit at this perfect time to where all of a sudden all of that got quashed. And now we're worried about layoffs suddenly because employers always want the upper hand, and they luckily large companies have the ability to influence policymakers a lot easier than average people are. And it was a very fast turnaround. This idea that inflation was happening wasn't an issue when we had inflation for quite a while, slowly. And then for some reason, um, the market felt like there was all this inflation, and they tied it all specifically to jobs or specifically to employees. Um, and I don't really understand that because there's other things going on in the world than just what's happening in the USA. I know that's difficult to comprehend sometimes, but the world is bigger than what's inside the borders of the United States. And the reason I believe inflation was happening had to do with a lot more global issues, such as the pandemic, such as conflict happening in Europe, so and other factors. So that is not something that I'm really excited about. Is everyone talking about the inflation? Because I believe you can overinflate the issue of inflation. And that's exactly what's happening, in my opinion. Um, I think the tools that are being used are really crude and extreme. And I think, of course, the people who hurt when inflation is being um, managed in this way are the people who have the least, who are the most on the border of being, thrown over the edge, the financial edge. And so the people in middle, lower, and even lower than that economic situation are hit the hardest, and they have less ability now to choose their jobs, to maybe make requests of their employer. So I don't really like the tools being used. I'm not a happy camper, so to say, and I think a lot of people don't love the aggressive approach of tamping down inflation. I would have preferred a much more gradual approach, so that the employee market, that employees had more power. I don't think that was obviously a concern for the economists at the top, because they've probably never had to be that person. They've never had to work, a shift at McDonald's, or had to work, even just as a teacher. So they don't understand that. Even if you have a family member, I have found, who has one of those kind of jobs, unless you personally experience it, it's hard to speak on a topic or really understand the struggle. Sometimes I don't think we're honest enough about how difficult it can be. And sometimes also, if you're someone who had a job in high school or college for 6 weeks or 6 months, and you might say, well, I understand what it's like to be a waiter at a restaurant because I did that in college for a summer. Well, maybe you understand a little bit of what it's like to work in the service industry, but try working 10 years, 20 years. Are you really going to understand what a person whose whole life is dependent on the service industry, that is their job, and the struggles of that as your career? If you're in college and you have more than just, or you have a different career prospect, your career is not going to be in the service industry and you're only doing it for 6 weeks or 6 months, that's like a vacation. That'd be like me going on vacation to Paris and thinking, oh, now I'm a Parisian. I know everything on how to live as a Parisian because I stayed in France for 6 weeks or I did a study abroad for 6 months. Now I know what it's like to be a French person. Wouldn't you think that's crazy? That's why I think it's just as crazy to say you've had a job for 6 weeks or 6 months and you understand the struggles or the concerns and issues of someone who's making a whole career in an industry. I'm not saying that your knowledge base isn't more than someone with zero experience. Some experience is better than none. That person who traveled to Paris, France for 6 weeks knows something more about Paris life than someone who's never had the opportunity. But it's this whole idea that it's like, I know everything because I had this brief foray. The truth is, most of life is very humbling. And when you have an opportunity like that to get to live outside of your common experience, and now you're having like a special experience, go ahead and enjoy that. That's a special thing. Celebrate that. It gives you a window into what other humans are experiencing, and you should seek those out. But don't think that you know everything about the people in that situation. It's really a humbling experience. And it's fun to go travel. I wonder if anyone's ever traveled. If we have anyone join the chat, they can shout out the places that they've traveled to. All right, let's go to another news website, see if we see any other headlines. Inflation's a really big topic in the US. I'm not as familiar if it's as much of a talking point in other countries around the world. So let's see. What the Japan Times has as their top article. Yeah. So this is so the top article I see on the Japan Times is written by Gabriel Dominguez. And of course, this is the one that's written, I believe, for foreign audiences to read, specifically English-speaking audiences. But these are the Japanese Times, so the idea is that it's very focused on what is important to Japan, the country, Japan, the people. And their top article for today is about what's happening in Taiwan and the defense of Taiwan. And it talks about Japan's military support, political support, along with the US. So that is a good article I can recommend if you want to check out the Japan Times. That is an article I have seen on other websites. I know the BBC Radio has been reporting on this issue, at least over the weekend when I've been listening in. So other news outlets are reporting on this, but of course it's interesting. That's the top article if you look at the Japan Times. That's why it's interesting. It's good to get your news from other sources, not just like CNN or Fox or US focused journalism. Speaking of Fox, let's see what's on their news site for today. No matter what your opinion is on the news, on different world events, it's really good to have a broad view of consuming the news, in my opinion. And that's what we do in the morning. So we're just trying to see a sample. Okay. So first thing I noticed about Fox News website compared to some of the other websites is it's a much more visual website. It's got a lot more clips of their hosts from their media site. So their website's not as much geared towards reading, if that makes any sense. So scrolling through, a lot of them are about politics. Okay, here's one about sports. This is a sad one. It's about Devin Willock. And that is a sad article if anyone's interested in that. If you're a Georgia fan, you would probably be. Um, I'm just trying to see if there's anything. Okay. A lot of the articles, even though they don't say politics, they're actually about politics. Um, so that's interesting and concerning. But let's see. I'm hoping they have. Okay, yeah. All right. So this is an interesting article on Fox News. This is something that everyone's probably this week going to start thinking about. You should be getting your W-2 statements if you live in the United States and you have an employer that files taxes for you. So your W-2 statement is going to be important to request or get. Sometimes businesses will let you have it accessible. So right now I have mine and I have started to prepare my taxes for the fiscal year 2022. And that's what this article is about. So this is an article from Fox Business. It was linked from the main Fox News website. And it is about the tax filing season beginning this week. This is the week to start them. If you haven't thought about it, this is the week to start doing it. It's better to do taxes early than late. You can start preparing them early. Of course, when you want to actually submit your tax filing is dependent on several factors. And I'm not going to give you that advice because I am not a certified public accountant. If you have taxes that are rather complicated, it's good to get a CPA. But let's see, I'm trying to find yes, here it is. So the article is called Tax Season Officially Begins on Monday, here are all of your questions answered by Megan Henney on the Fox Business website. So this is a good article to read if you're getting ready for your taxes. Start working on them this week. The filing date this year, I believe April 15th is again, I'm not a CPA, so I don't know the exact date that they're due. I always file my taxes in enough time. I don't have to worry about the actual deadline date. But if you're a business filing, there's strategies for when you file. I did hear on the news recently over the weekend that there was something like 600, I'm not sure if it was 600 million or 600 billion. I believe it was $600 billion of uncollected taxes that the IRS had not collected. That was just, statutorily they could collect and they hadn't collected because the IRS is understaffed. So I believe that issue is going to continue going forward if the IRS doesn't have an infusion of hiring. So hopefully the IRS will be hiring to address that issue because that is a big concern. We're all part of society. Paying your taxes is really just the responsible thing to do to help other people. It's I'm not calling taxes charity because it's not charity. It's just part of being in a civilized society with, clean streets, public schools. I remember when I first started paying taxes and I thought to myself, this is it. I'm an adult. I'm finally contributing back to society. So I was really thankful that I got to. All right, let's check out another website, find out another news article. This might be our last news article for today. You can only read so many news articles in the morning. So I don't want to recommend too many for you because realistically, we don't have necessarily an hour to consume news. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll look through news, I'll browse it, and I'll read some key points. And I consume a lot of news that way, but it is important to actually read news and not just listen to news. It is a different delivery method. And I will say, sad news or news that has more um, gruesome details, it's not something I want to hear another person speak. It's easier for me to read it because I get less caught up in the emotion. Unless maybe you need that. Maybe you need a good cry for the day. So let's check another website, another news website. Um, Trying to think of a good one. Let's try the BBC News. I often listen to BBC News, but they do have a really wonderful website. I do like the way that it's laid out. And you're going to find a different emphasis. The BBC News actually has their main article for the day is the same as CNN's website. So that's interesting because it was about an event that happened in California. Which is really sad. Really sad event. But there is some other ones. So there are other 4 top articles on BBC. They have it's an article about Russia, an article about Pakistan. The next one is about Dubai. And then the 4th article, that's the top of their header, is about Canada. So BBC, this isn't even the BBC World News. This is just BBC News. And that's the British Broadcasting, if you're wondering what the BBC is, network. So I will recommend their website. It does look like they have a lot of interesting articles for the day. I'm trying to see if there's one that really speaks to me that I can say, hey, this would be a nice one to wake up to. Well, there's kind of one of those fun articles that is also sort of science-y. We have one about bacteria controlling your brain, and the image is a woman eating yogurt. I'm assuming this has to do with gut bacteria and the micro flora in our bodies that we are host to. Yes, that is about what it is. Okay, so the article is interesting. If you don't know much about gut bacteria and the role it plays in our body's health, this would be a really interesting article. It's very long and it has a lot of technical words in it, but it does appear to be written in a way that is, written for the average non-science person. So you don't have to be too intimidated. And that article is written by Marian Frankel and Matt Warren. And it's called Looking at the Multitudes of Bacteria, Fungi, and Other Microorganisms Living in Our Guts. Could help us think better and even offer new ways of treating mental health conditions. So that's an interesting article I can recommend. And then I think the last article for today, it kind of caught my attention. It's called The Pressure on Women to Have the Perfect Birth. Yes, there is a lot of pressure on women to have the perfect birth. So this article is, of course, by Amanda Ruggieri. And it does happen to go into a lot of detail. So if you don't know a lot about women's issues or mothers' issues in particular, if you are a woman, even if you're not a woman who plans on conceiving or being a birth giver in this world, that's not the role for everyone. A lot of people choose not to. I still think it's important to read about other people's life experiences and concerns. And birth is one of those human experiences that we all have because someone out there gave birth to us. Maybe you have a close relationship with your biological mother that gave birth with you. A lot of humans are close, but some aren't. And that's, not something um, that is not uncommon too, because there are several people that don't have relationships with their birth mother. I'm very close with my mother, but that's not the story for everyone. And I have given birth, and I will say that this article does talk about a lot of concerns that I had leading up to it. I was mostly concerned with um, the safety. A lot of folks, if you don't know, even though pregnancy is the way that all humans arrive here on Earth, it is it is a scary event because it is a way that a normally healthy person can suddenly have a medical condition that will end your life. So there are things that happen where you wanted this, perfect birth. Um, and I have heard that. I've heard that among my friends. I don't know if anyone else has that experience of what was your perfect idea of a birth and then it didn't go that way and the kind of feelings you had around that. I will say my two biggest concerns were, of course, I wanted to make sure that I was physically capable of doing most of the things I was capable of doing before giving birth. And then secondly, I was concerned about the cost of birth. So in the US, of course, it's quite expensive to give birth, thousands of dollars. Um, and I have insurance, and it was thousands of dollars. So not all countries is that big of a concern. I will say my aftercare that was provided to me at the hospital was excellent. I did feel safer because I had my birth in a hospital, but I don't think it was a perfect experience. I don't know if any birth is perfect. Maybe there are perfect births, but I think there are things that happen that are unpredictable, and you have to be adaptable in your mind for them. But that's it for the news. That's the last article I'm going to look up and read. These are just articles that I'm planning on reading today. We're getting close to being on for an hour, and that's normally going to be my setup for the day. So the sun is starting to rise. If you've noticed, the sun has gotten brighter and brighter outside my window, and that is real. That's not a setup. I did want to position myself in front of a window because if I'm going to be doing some morning podcasts, I like to be able to see the sunrise. Although today it is quite foggy outside. So I can't actually physically see the sun because, of course, there's so much humidity blocking it. But the world is waking up. There's a lot more light. The birds, I have not started to hear tweet. So that is surprising because normally I do hear some birds outside my window get very active. So maybe as spring gets here, I'll hear more and more of those little guys out there. So I like to do a side braid in the morning when I'm getting ready for my chores and everything like that. Everyone does their hair differently. I do mine probably the easiest way possible for someone with long hair. And I do everything with a little hair scrunchie. So I'm just going to do a really simple, quick braid. And there we go. See how simple it is? We're just going to go over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under. See? over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under. I learned to braid when I was a very little girl. And for a long time, I didn't braid my hair after that. But as an adult, I find that it's just the easiest hairstyle for me to have. And I can see why it was so popular. So this is a great way to get around the house in the morning. Of course, I usually wear my hair up or I curl my hair. But we just can't fuss with that today. All right. So this was our first podcast. It was really fun to have everyone here on the Planet Human podcast. I do promise I will get better with this with practice. And I do think going through the different websites, I do like some of the websites that we went to today. I may at some point make a short, specific episode about, why I use certain websites that I do, just trying to get a variety of world news, see what's out there in the morning. And of course, the whole point of consuming news is to maintain some connection to the world around us that's going on. We're not islands unto ourselves. There's a greater context to humanity. And news is really good to have every morning to understand what's going on today, because you don't know who you might talk to or interact with who's affected by the news in the world. There are people with families that are experiencing the kind of hardships and tragedy that is in the world news, but people can also be reading the news and affected by it. So it gives you some context when you're interacting with other people to be more kind and sensitive to what they're experiencing that day as well. And it can be hard. Sometimes people focus more on business news. Sometimes it's more of what's happening with tragedy and conflict. There's a lot more science news. I like to consume all the different news articles as much as I can. And I recommend trying to get a variety in the day. Every day, consuming some news adds up over a lifetime. You end up really increasing your knowledge base. And I do believe it helps you understand people more. Even if you can't perfectly understand another person's experience, again, at least you can feel humbled that you don't know everything. And humbling ourselves in the world is a good thing, because the older we get, the more confident we feel in our specific knowledge area. It's just how it is. It's okay to be confident in yourself. You should be a confident person. You are going to do amazing things today. I know it. But just know that there's a lot of other humans also doing amazing things, and we really should be encouraging each other. I know we're kind of pushed to compete because that happens to be the society or culture that we may be living in. But just remember, the competition does end, and you don't have to compete on every level of life. Like, pick and choose like one little thing, one little day. Like, the people who play football, they're going to go out there, they're going to get on the field, they're going to compete. But when the game's over, they're all football players, and they have in common more after the game's over than what they have in common with just other people who don't play football. So know who your support is, know the people who are your friends, and the other humans that you want to rely on at some point. We all have something that we can find in common, of course. Okay. Well, that's going to end it for the first episode. I really appreciate it. Thoughts and opinions, I want to hear them. And please help me grow this and make it better. All right. Signing off. Bye. I'm still trying to find where the buttons are to turn it off, so that's fun.